Good?
Yep.
Call into order the February 8th meeting for Environmental Matters Committee. For the record, all the members are present. And as far as agenda, I would ask for a motion to approve the agenda to amend it to remove 03623 because that will be withdrawn. And so we don't have to take action.
Mr. Chair, I'll move approval of the agenda as amended to remove 034, you said?
036.
036.
Second?
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. And on to the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from January 26th?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. And jumping forward to 02823. Excuse me. The city noise prohibitions and enforcement. And where we left off at the last meeting was asking, we asked staff to update the staff report with a number of other requests that we had made. And I'm looking at the staff report, I believe that has been done. So I was hoping we could start with that, but we may need to table that for the moment until Ms. Gold gets here. In the meantime, we could jump to, in the meantime, we could do, look at the other amendment, the new amendments, I suppose, from law. Well, actually, we haven't even gotten to the first few. Let me think how to do this. Oh, there she is, right on.
Waiting on me?
Yes. It's all right.
Something else first.
That's all right. So I just summarized that we had asked for more information in the staff report, and that's been done. I guess first question, does everybody have the latest?
Well, I'm not sure that we do. Where is that what, you're talking about the staff report revised?
Yeah, let me see
It was
what
in an email
version it is.
today. It's the revised.
Today?
Or yes.
I sent it, I think yesterday or just this morning.
So what's attached is not the most,
And Jackie Ms. Gold sent it to us as well. Let me see, the one attached,
Vicki emailed it to Kaylin to include with your materials, but I also sent it out last night. It should be the same thing. I just wanted to make sure you guys had it if you had a chance to
I
look
think
at it.
the one in Legistar is the most recent, yes. It is. I don't know about Granicus, but let me see. The date at the top should
This
be
one?
updated January 30th.
That is the correct one.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the correct one. Ms. Cobb, could you walk us through some of the additions to this? I don't think the purpose has changed. Impact of legislation on operations. I saw I think you added to the staff impact some of the information you gave us last time. Oh, actually, let me bring up my other
There's a lot of good stuff in it.
version of this. So yeah, I think you updated the staff update as far as your estimate. I think it was,
Right.
well, I'm just bringing up my notes here.
Okay. Yes, Jackie Guile, Deputy City Manager for Resilience and Sustainability. So on, yes, this does not have page numbers on it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. On the 5th page, after the chart, there's public education, and then there's impact of legislation on staffing. The committee had asked us to expand a little bit on the
Is your
impact
mic-
of staffing.
Is your mic on?
Yes, mic is on.
Can we get that turned up a little? I can't hear it very well.
can't hear.
I'll speak a little louder or hold it closer. So expanding on the impact of legislation on staffing, currently the assistant city manager had included in here that planning and zoning was at capacity if we were looking at the enforcement and permitting staff to respond to complaints and investigate them, document them, and issue citations. And then I added that potentially the 2 environmental inspectors, because now we have 2 rather than 1, in the Department of Public Works could support the code enforcement staff in responding to complaints and investigating, documenting, and issuing citations. But that is currently the legislation, I believe, directs the city manager to direct the staff on how they're going to implement this legislation. So it could be through the Planning and Zoning Department or the Department of Public Works. But we're just pointing out there are staff in both of those departments that have responsibilities that align well with this legislation. And we do have 2 environmental inspectors now that can assist with this. Depending, I point out in the staff report that depending on the time of year that this is implemented will impact how busy the staff is. So if this is implemented in the dead of winter, which right now, I believe Alderwoman O'Neill's amendment was that this takes effect December of 2024, well, there's not a lot of leaf blowers being used in the winter. There'd probably be very little impact. We'd probably get very few complaints, very little observed violations, if any, during that period. If this was implemented in the spring, when there was spring cleanup, I imagine there could be a couple of hours a week of staff time responding to complaints, investigating, and issuing citations. If we do, and I also say in here, if we do good public awareness education campaigns in advance of the effective date, we'll see a lot less violations. That was our experience with the polystyrene foam ban. We initially put out public information. We did mailers as well as social media and website information about the ban, what it entailed, what the requirements were, what the fines would be, gave retailers plenty of time to get rid of their stock. We followed up, I believe 6 months out or 3 months out with more information publicly. And then the week of implementation, we did social media posts almost daily, and then the day before. So we didn't have a lot of violations with polystyrene ban. We had some initial problems with a few restaurants. We issued warnings, and then we issued a few citations. And since then, very rarely do we get a complaint from someone or observe a violation. I think we would have the same type of, if we do good public education, we would have probably the same kind of result here. The businesses, I imagine, will be the most compliant because they will educate their staff and be responsible. The management will be responsible. I probably will be the residential areas where we might see people that aren't aware that they're not supposed to be using a leaf blower, and we would need to be more follow-up education may be needed. So if we implement this in the spring or in the fall, which I imagine will be where we see most leaf blowers being used, we could have 2 hours of extra work a week with staff during that busy season, and then I predict that number would half the next year, and then could half again as people become more accustomed to the rules and requirements.
And I would encourage staff to look at potentially maybe utilizing some of the, I'm just trying to think of a source of funds to send out any kind of mailers. Maybe this already has that built in, but to send out some mailers targeting or information sessions for the landscape companies ahead of time, just to brief them on
Yes.
what's going on.
And I included here that it would entail about 15 hours of staff time to put together the informational mailers and for website design, content design, and media posts, as we did with the polystyrene foam ban.
Okay. Any other, you want to question on this, or do you want to keep going?
Well, I'd like, if I might,
Yeah, of course.
just following up on that point, I assume the city's PIO would be handling the public information piece.
Yes.
So what would the cost be for her department to take this on, to add it to the existing workload?
So that's what I'm saying. With the 15 hours of work initially, my experience working with the PIO for the phone ban was that we worked together on content for the website and for social media posts, and for the mailers. And so that's the 15 hours I calculate there. Between the staff, whether that's me or someone in Public Works or Planning and Zoning, and the PIO working together on content, and then the PIO doing, so it's mostly the PIO, but then the content comes from some of the other staff. Put that together and then move out that information. And when she does that, she can put together the posts ahead of time, and then she puts those on a timer. So the date and the time she can pre-put together, and they just go out on their own.
And so she's already been made aware that this is potentially an additional responsibility.
She may not have been made aware of this particular ordinance, but that's something that she does as part of her responsibilities. She's helped with a number of different public awareness type of campaigns before.
Okay, and we hear all the time about how much people's workloads have
Right.
increased. So that's the impetus behind my question. So, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other question about staffing part of this?
Yeah, actually I do, but maybe I'll just wait and make some general comments on all
Could you
of
turn your
this.
mic on, please?
Yes, I do have some comments on staffing, both for the city staff, but also some of the claims about staffing for the contractors. I do have some comments page by page when it's time for that.
Okay, so the next, so the next section is, let's see, is updated. I think you added some information about the impact of legislation on city environmental goals, public health, environmental justice. Any-
Mr. Chair, what are you reading from?
This staff report on page
Oh,
2.
Page 2?
This is the
The heading,
revised.
yeah, the heading is impact.
Yours looks very different from mine.
Well, that's just because I made highlights
Oh,
and stuff
okay.
on there. The heading's impact of legislation on city environmental goals, public health, environmental justice. So you summarized a lot of the impacts from, do you want to get any summary of this? I thought this is really good information as far as,
Some of this was already in the previous staff report. We fleshed it out a little bit more at the committee's request. As if you've read this or even skimmed it, you can see this goes beyond, just an environmental kind of problem. Largely it's a public health problem, and it's not just noise and the damage that leaf blowers cause to people's hearing, but to public health in general because of the emissions from gas-powered leaf blowers. They don't have the type of controls that you see with a four-stroke engine. They're two-stroke engines, and two-stroke engines don't have the type of filters and requirements that four-stroke engines like a lawnmower would have or a car would have. And there's examples of the gas-powered lawn care equipment. Just in one state alone, in Massachusetts, was one that popped up. The lawn care equipment alone emits as much carbon dioxide as 135,000 cars, and a trip from, I believe there's somewhere in here where a heavy-duty truck going from Texas to Oregon emits as much carbon dioxide as using a gas-powered lawn leaf blower for half an hour. So it emits quite a lot of carbon dioxide as well as a lot of the other chemicals as benzene, nitrous oxide, toluene, and a lot of other carcinogens. And it's emitting those into our atmosphere for everyone to inhale, but especially the people who are nearby, living nearby, walking nearby. And it's a particular health hazard for the people who are operating the leaf blowers, who are largely low-income, minority, often undocumented immigrants who are unlikely to advocate for themselves, to speak up about health problems they may not even know are associated with the operation of leaf blowers. And they're operating the leaf blowers in very close proximity to the emissions to the exhaust, and so they're in direct inhalation, and they often, as you've observed, don't wear protective gear to cover their face or their nose. So there's, besides just ear damage, which I've documented here, that can be caused by leaf blowers, there's a whole slew of other health problems that can be caused by leaf blowers, as well as the environmental impacts, interruption with wildlife that communicate by sound. It interrupts their migration patterns, their breeding, nesting patterns. It removes topsoil because of the velocity that are used with leaf blowers, which affects stormwater retention, soil retention, pulls off the nutrients in the needed topsoil. So there's a whole host of environmental problems and mostly public health problems associated with gas-powered leaf blowers.
All right, any questions on that additional information?
Yes, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank you. I found this extremely responsive to all of the different questions we were asking the last time, starting with why leaf blowers and why not everything else. And I think this gives us not only a definitive answer to why leaf blowers, but also the requested information about all the other jurisdictions that have also found this to be a problem. So I thought that was extraordinarily helpful. We have a citizen comment or two about the leaf blowers, and I feel very comfortable, and in fact, did respond by email to one of them that leaf blowers are particular and are worthy of our initial focus. It may not be our final focus. So I really want to thank you for that. I thought that there were some interesting things that got removed from the last report. In the last report on page 3, the impact, there was the second sentence on that. Scientists consider lawn equipment as one of the largest sources of greenhouse gas pollution in the United States. That left this document, or if it showed up again, I couldn't find it. But I was wondering, is that because it might have been an overstatement, or?
No, I mean, probably, in editing, I may have moved it or cut and pasted it and failed to put it back in
Okay.
somewhere. Or maybe I did put it in a different place.
I think it's in there. I remember reading that.
Okay. Well, I think that, again, though, strengthens why we're looking at this. So every bit of the new information, and there's quite we've doubled the size of the report at least, was extremely helpful.
Well, good. I'm glad that's helpful to you. I thought the chart might be helpful. I know the narrative is, you like to have things in narrative, but I thought the chart for what other jurisdictions in Maryland are doing. I reached out to my colleagues in other Maryland jurisdictions because, when we do our research, the research that I performed to do the first staff report, we were just picking up who actually has bans, but I knew that other jurisdictions were considering bans or had other programs. And in speaking with some of them that have rebate programs, they said that some of the rebate programs have been around for a long time. Like in DC, they've had one for a very long time. And some of them are as low as $20 to $50, which isn't a lot. But they said they've left them in place because it's sort of a feel-good incentive program for residents, and residents, it works for them to bring back in old machinery or to buy machinery, depending on how they have it set up. So sometimes it's just as small as $20 or $50, some of the incentive programs in other jurisdictions. And in some jurisdictions, it's a phase-in over a period of years. And the Maryland House bill is a phase-in for all, but that covers all equipment, because not all lawn care equipment has progressed to the point where it's as available and as effective as electric leaf blowers. So they have up till 2030 to go completely electric with all lawn care equipment. That's on state properties.
Right. On page 6 of the new document, we talk about the public education, and it occurred to me, the last sentence, communication must be provided in English and Spanish. That's a really important thing to have happen. The section on page 7 that talks about the use of leaf blowers, they don't just blow leaves, they blow grass too. I mean, they're used not just in the fall when they're being used during all the warm months when there's lawn mowing going on. So I think the use of these blowers is more prevalent than some people may consider. In terms of the further implementation and the expense, I see where California allocated 27 million. This is on the last page, page 8. And I just made a note that we may need to ask for some state help in terms of helping the companies make their transition to these electric forms. And I think right now we have a governor in office that could look upon that favorably. One of the best parts, though, is again on page 8, where you did the work to go to the companies and solicit input from them. A couple of their points I would take with a grain of salt: may need to increase hourly rates. Okay. But if everybody's going to have to do it, it's not putting them at a competitive disadvantage. So I thought that you really captured some good points there. And then I thought that the mitigating points were also well taken. The trend in the industry is towards this e-equipment, so let's get on with it.
Yeah.
Not just leaf blowers, but eventually everything.
Yeah. So I have to give credit to Hope Stewart in the Department of Planning and Zoning. She helped me reach out to the landscaping companies to get those responses.
Yep, but we got it. And I think that would be my last point. I don't know whether we can, in the legislation itself, reference this study. My thinking being that after the fact, when we pass this, which I hope we will do, we're going to start hearing from people. And I would like to say, hey, the staff did their research. And there's a very good document that gives a very fulsome explanation of what we're about. And why don't you take a look at that and then get back to us about your concerns about this legislation. But anyway, very much thank you and all of the staff that worked on this. Very responsive to the issues that we were raising and people were raising with us the last time. So very valuable for me anyway. So thank you.
You're welcome.
May I
yes,
ask, Chair, I
Alderman.
just had a follow-up question about the, the House Bill 91.
Yes.
That was just introduced.
Yes.
Last month, so the bill will say that it's to be implemented in 2030?
No, it's to be implemented, phased in. So by 2030, there would be, you could only use electric landscaping equipment, all types, lawnmowers, weed whackers, hedge trimmers, all landscaping equipment on state properties, state-owned properties would have to be electric by 2030. So they would start phasing it in.
Okay, so it's not legislation yet, it's just been introduced.
It's just been introduced. It was in
January.
first reader
Okay.
last week. Yes.
That's what I thought I was reading, but I thought I heard something different, so, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and just highlight a few other things here. You said over 100 cities and towns across the U.S. have banned or restricted use of gasoline-powered leaf blowers. City of Baltimore, Hyattsville, Chevy Chase, Somerset, and Maryland have already done this. Prince George's County is exploring it. Howard County is considering a pilot program. And I think I mentioned last time DC with the... But they
DCS.
passed it, 6 years ago?
Yeah, they have an outright ban,
Yeah.
sale and use.
But it doesn't take effect until July, I think you said.
But as always, California leads, 1990, Los Angeles.
Oh, yeah, yeah, wow. Yeah. And Portland, I'll have to talk to former Alderman Rodriguez over there. And then, yeah, the chart was very helpful because it I think we'll come back to this when we talk about the fines, the resolution.
Anne Arundel County's not listed though.
No,
Councilwoman Ravian is looking to introduce something. I don't know how far, I think she's waiting to see how ours go. And I guess that's all I have. I think it was a really good point you raised as far, I wasn't even thinking of this at the time, but about the two-stroke engines and how that's really what makes them so polluting and loud and whatnot. But as far as the rebate, I know that's something personally, maybe we could talk about this as a committee in the future when we talk about our budget ideas, proposals, but this may be a very good use of relatively small sliver of one-time use money. We could set aside maybe, I don't know, thinking out loud here, just $10,000 maybe, just to have to provide the rebates, maybe even 5,000, whatever. I don't even know how much we need yet. But if that's something you'd be willing to give some consideration to, we could set something aside just to offer that to residents, maybe even early adopters for landscape companies, like say at first, if a company wants to do this before the actual trigger date, maybe we can help by offering some kind of rebate. I don't know.
right.
But-
And as far as availability, I didn't spend a lot of time on availability. I did have an opportunity to speak to Jared Littman at a different event yesterday about what they carry at True Value. And he probably has, he said roughly, we looked at it online quickly together, what he has in stock right now. And in dead of winter, he has about 10 different electric blowers and a couple of gas blowers in stock. He says, but it's the winter. So he would be ordering his spring inventory soon. But he said, whatever passes, if there's a demand, he orders it.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of demand. And the same thing, that you find the same thing at Home Depot if you go online and look. They have things in stock, but they'll just order it if there's a demand.
So in that sense, it's good to have some advanced lead time.
Right.
As
So they can find
far as
suppliers.
implementation.
Right.
Are there any other general questions about the staff report or general comments, questions before we launch into, I'd like to launch into the amendments if that's good with the committee.
No, that's fine.
Okay. All right. And thank you, Ms. Skyld,
You're welcome.
for that. So moving on to, get the right notes up here.
Did we address any of the amendments I thought we had talked about?
Did we talk about Ms. Jackson? Do you remember?
I thought we talked about them a little bit, but I don't think we passed them.
Well, so Amendment 1 should be relatively easy. I think we may have done, but in any case, this is the one from Alderwoman O'Neill. And this is just has the trigger date as December 30th. I guess my question would be for law office, I don't mind pushing back the date. I'd even say maybe changing it to 12 months from adoption might be the best. But are there thoughts on that from the,
I think there's a
Committee.
conflict in the amendment itself, though,
yeah, that
between
was
1
mine.
and 2.
Well, I think that came up last time,
Right.
that question. I'm also wondering what's the most appropriate way to word this. I don't like putting dates in the code if it can help it. I don't know if it's legally better, sufficient to put it in the hereby statements at the end of the resolution, or if it's something we should be putting in code.
Well, if we have a time, if we're going to give it a time limit, I think number 2 would be the appropriate place. Instead of saying she'll take effect upon adoption, she'll take effect 12 months from adoption.
Right. That's what I was thinking too, but what's the law office's comment?
Cynthia Reuter, Law Office Policy Analyst. So the reason that you have the two different parts to it is that the leaf blower part is just a
that's
small
right.
section of
That's right.
the ordinance.
Yeah.
The rest of the entire ordinance goes into effect immediately on adoption.
Right.
Except for gas-powered leaf blowers, which would go in to effect December 30th. Whether to put that into a section instead of the ordinance, 6 one, half dozen the other.
Yeah. Well, do you want, we could just have everything trigger in 12 months and keep it simple?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
our staff, Ms. Jackson, tells us that we gave this a favorable recommendation at the last meeting.
All right, well, let's just skip forward then. Is it good with that?
So do we want to correct that contradiction, though? Obviously, we didn't before.
Depends on the day, right? All right.
But just a thought on the date of implementation, that might be an amendment that you might want to consider when you take it up for second reader, because you know what date it's going to go into effect, and you can act accordingly of when it, you know it's going to pass, and when do you want it to go into effect. You'll have a date certain as second reader.
Well, we've given it a favorable recommendation as is,
Yeah.
the O'Neill
time.
amendment already. So I'm not sure why we would amend it again on second reader when we already have an amendment that speaks to it.
It just might be something to keep an option open.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay,
We'll think about it
is that the only one?
for the meeting, but I think for the committee's sake, I guess we'll just move on to Amendment 2. However, I guess my question for law office, does your, well, let's just
That's
go
your
with,
amendment, Mr.
let's just go with number 2 for
Chair.
the moment. So number 2 is from me. This is my intent with the, we didn't take action on this, did we? So my intent with this was just to make it easier to understand, but also remove, to make it clear that we're not requiring sound measurements for the leaf blowers or the high frequency sound emitters. That's just an outright prohibition. So that's why I removed some of these other requirements that were mentioned, just to simplify things. And I think this addresses part of the public comment that we received, because I don't think they were looking at the amendment. So if there are any questions about this? Yes, so Alderman Arnett.
I mean, I agree with this in substance, but my concern is we say prohibited gas leaf blowers, high-frequency sound emitters, but we have a whole discussion and a lot of input on noises from boats. And are we assuming that noises from boats and other kinds of noises are captured elsewhere in the code and so don't need to be done here with this amendment? Is that
Well, that would,
the thinking?
that line of the legislation would still be, is not being modified by the amendment. I'm bringing it up now.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Is that correct? So that
That's right
would
above on page
be
3. Sound levels from water.
on the amendment or the?
No, on the actual drafted ordinance. Sound
Yeah,
levels
so that's
from-
A and B. This is, the
Right.
amendment only impacts letter C.
Okay, all right. So I'm good. I'd
Yes, Alderman.
make a motion that we
Al-
adopt Amendment 2.
Alderman has a,
I'll second that, and then I'd like to just ask a question about the new 2 on page 2. Are there any qualifiers for high-frequency sound emitters? Exactly what is that? Or do we leave that to the city manager to decide?
well, I just want to try to understand more what you're referring to.
It
as
says
qualifiers.
what's being prohibited. Number 2 is high-frequency sound emitters designed for animal and pet deterrence.
Mm-hmm.
Are there specific devices that we're targeting? And who
Yeah.
knows what they are?
Yeah, so these are devices that are often plugged in to an outdoor outlet, kept on a porch or outside of a business, In particular, the complaint we received, I think, was from Eastport and a nearby business that had one of these installed in the back of the building, designed to deter, intended to deter, I believe, like raccoons or things like that. And it was causing migraines. So that would be the type of a device. There's the other one would be something like they also make these for back porch to deter supposedly to deter dog barking. And so it emits this sound whenever it hears a dog bark, it emits this high frequency sound. So the way this would be, so that's the type of device, if that answers you.
Okay, I'm not opposed to it. I just want to make sure we know what it is. And particularly as the city manager is going to be overseeing this,
We know it when we don't hear it.
so, okay, thank you.
Is that clear for the city manager's office? Do you think there's anything that needs to be expanded upon on that? Okay. Well, there is so there's a motion on the floor
And it's been properly
and
seconded.
seconded. So all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Next up, we have amendment number 3, which is also one of mine. Wait, I think I decided not to do this one.
Yeah, I thought you were going to withdraw this.
Oh, yeah. So I'm not,
In favor of the
I'm
language
not
that-
introducing this one.
Right.
Can law office remove that from the agenda? I mean, from the Legistar.
This is different.
So the one amendment, there's a new amendment on our desk from presumably the law office, and Amendment 4. It doesn't have a sponsor, so I think what we'll determine now is if this is something the committee wants to sponsor or not.
I do.
So would you, Ms. Ruther, be able to explain the background impetus on this and what it does?
So we're withdrawing the old 3.
That's
And
correct,
the
yeah.
new 3 is what we have in front of us, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it doesn't have to formally be withdrawn, it just won't be introduced by me. Yeah.
Okay, so today I was working on this cheat sheet on sound levels, explaining what the Annapolis levels are compared to the state levels, and what each level kind of represents. 20 dBA is rustling leaves, 50 is a quiet office, 70 is a hairdryer, just so you can see what the numbers mean in the code that we're proposing. While I was doing that, I looked up boats, and then I found that the state has regulations on boat sound limits on the water, which is in a totally different section of the state regulations than the regular sound levels. So this was a new find for me. I didn't realize it existed. So I put together this amendment to include this into the ordinance, because a part of this ordinance is to say that Annapolis will abide by the state recommendations on sound noise level. So the state has 90 dBA for state waterways, and so this would make 90 dBA for city. We don't have waterways that are direct to the city, but the city does oversee waterways. So we did jurisdiction, so it'd be waters of the city jurisdiction.
So this would set, let's see, I'm looking at Roman numeral 3. Comar noise level limits is adopted as the maximum noise level for vessels on the water of city jurisdiction. So in city waters, this would be adopting Comar noise levels, which are 90 dBA, which would be, now presumably this this is, well, actually, I don't know. I was going to say presumably this would take precedent anyway, state, unless we set something lower or higher, right, than the state.
Well, it doesn't necessarily. So the state with noise regulations, the state says this is what we could recommend. You, community, you decide whether you want to take our recommendations.
Okay. And so would this adopt the 90 or would it go with the
It would adopt the 90 because that's what the state has. So basically, we're saying that whatever the state has, that's what we're going to use.
Okay. 'Cause personally, I'd rather go with our lower 75, I think, which is our current max. I mean, just speaking for myself here, my initial reaction, just because most of our waterways are going to be, lower energy creeks as opposed to like a river, like South River, Severn, or the Bay, where, you're going to have power boats. Because I think my assumption is the state's levels are pretty much, they're thinking of boat engine noise, right? That shouldn't really be an issue. I wouldn't want a power boat, going too fast on our creeks anyway. It's basically, we have no wake zones probably in most of our creeks, so that shouldn't be necessarily an issue. I think the intention with this is more in the party boats, so the people on those party boats, not necessarily the engine.
Exactly.
So that's where I'd rather have that. I'm thinking off the cuff here, but I'd rather have that noise level from the people be the same as it would be people on land, right? If that makes sense, right? And I don't know, what are the committee? Alderman, you were speaking up.
So I'm thinking we should outlaw gas-powered motors for boats and only have electric engines, which
Only
makes
sailboats?
the
Only
mayor
sailboats that only.
only sailboats with electric engines and electric-powered. What's Gavin's the ferry boat? Electric-powered ferry boats.
Does that mean you're going to get rid of your boat?
Yep. I'm going to go to electric engines. Now, first of all, I think that's always bothered me. There's two different kinds of noises we're talking about here. One is engine noise and one is not engine noise, meaning party noise, glasses clinking, et cetera, et cetera. But I want to take a second to thank you for this, except I know full well that when the lights are out and I'm in bed and I hear that damn mosquito, it is more than 20 decibels. It sounds like it's 100. But no, this is helpful, but I think it does point out that we're really thinking about two different kinds of noises, those that are being emitted by engines in Annapolis, what does it say here? Waters of city jurisdiction, and then the non-engine noise that's being emitted by acoustic, music and partiers and so forth. And so I think that's still not clear in this proposed Amendment 4. Because if we're bound by the state decibels, I agree with you that that's way too high, I think, to have going on around shoreline.
The 90 dBA is as measured on the water. The maximum levels that are currently in there, it's like, in a residential area, the maximum level would be 65. So that's as measured on land.
Okay,
And there's the big difference because sound goes down, the dBA goes down with distance.
except you have this nice helpful little box on the bottom left that talks about how sound diminishes, the decibels diminish with distance, but it diminishes differentially whether it's being propagated over water or being propagated in neighborhoods. And so I really do think there's, again, a dichotomy that we have to think about here. Rooftop dining, when we were dealing with that legislation, the noise up on the upper level propagated further than dining at the surface because there were more buildings and other obstacles in the way. But I think this dichotomy between engine noise and non-engine noise is something that I'm not sure we have fully addressed here. I heard you say on the land, 55 decibels, so,
65 in
65.
residential zones. Nighttime, it's 55.
right. So is that any noise emanating from a boat, whether it's
It's-
motor or non-motor?
Any noise coming from a boat. It says any noise coming from a boat must be measured on land.
Yep, it does. say that.
That's
Right.
the big change here, is
Right.
where it's measured from. Other than that, it doesn't matter what kind of noise it is. If the noise, whether it's music or whether it's engine, doesn't matter. It has to be within the dBA levels set by the code.
So that brings us to the amendment, B, III, where it's talking about noise limits adopted at the maximum noise level for vessels on the waters of city jurisdiction. And I guess I would like to have a definition of what are waters of city jurisdiction.
I can request that from the harbor master.
Okay?
Well, I think that, I don't know if that's, I think that's good to define, but that's probably going to be defined elsewhere in the code, not this section that this legislation is.
Okay, that would answer the question.
It's kind of a, well, it's kind of a moot, from my perspective, a moot point, because I'm personally, I like number one, which is inserting the blue in Roman numeral 2, II, allowable levels of boat noise from the water as measured from land. I like putting that in there, but I, at the moment, don't support number 2. So,
Well, number 2 is not currently in the code,
yeah.
so
So that what I'm saying is I'd like to move forward with 1.
You mean II,
Yeah,
but not III?
yeah.
I.
Okay, so now I'm confused. So we are going forward with B1, not B2 or B3?
No?
B2, the blue change in B2 is what I'm proposing, and not,
Okay, so not
B3.
B1 and not B3.
well, B1, BI is in there now.
Why
Two-
is it in red underlined? I don't,
Yeah, all, the red is in the
Draft legislation.
draft, the legislation as drafted. The blue is the amendment proposed by the law.
okay.
So what you're thinking that if we just don't amend with BIII, we can avoid a lot of issues, and it's, as Cynthia says, it's defined as measured from the land, and we have the decibels, so we're good to go. We don't need to complicate things with III.
Yeah, that's, yeah. Second.
Okay, so let me ask that question again. So we are keeping B1 and B2,
Yes,
your I and II.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a motion on the floor?
Yeah, was that a motion?
Yeah, I did say I would sponsor this amendment if the committee doesn't want to do it, but I think this Amendment 4 would be to make the change in BII, but not make the change BIII.
Is there a second?
I can second it, and I'd be fine with that being a committee amendment.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries unanimously. All right, and is that under,
yes, thank
Well,
you
if
to the
I'm
committee
saying-
for considering this.
yeah, and thank you for the research. I do think this is good to have in the record. If we could get the sound levels uploaded into the Granicus Legistar as well, Be good. So that's a good comparison.
So then is a motion to recommend approval of 028, 23 with amendments 1, 2, and 4.
Yeah.
I make that motion.
All right.
I think this becomes, 4 becomes the new 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Is
So
there-
I'll second it.
Okay. It's been seconded. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. And then now we have to move on to R 5123, which is the
Could I just make one
Yes,
last? I
Alderman.
really do want to thank all the staff for guiding us through. This was tougher legislation you would think, and we've gotten a good staff report, good Office of Law work on this, and thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. And that's the benefit of taking our time with legislation. We can get all these things worked out. Okay, so R 5123, the fines. I know, first of all, we didn't take action on this last time because we had some questions about, I believe, the amendment. So I want to turn to our colleague, Alderwoman Finlayson, to see, was there any clarification from the Finance Committee? Was this discussed again?
I don't think
the
we
last meeting?
discussed it again.
Okay.
And I don't think this amendment came from the Finance Committee. I think it came from Alderwoman Tierney.
She has to request this.
So
So-
it's going to go back to Finance?
I can send it back to finance because she would have Tierney request it.
Okay.
Well, so
Is
the,
this on the agenda for Monday?
My city council office.
well, let's look at the underlying resolution. Underlying resolution just sets a new section for public peace and order violation, noise prohibition,
Both.
and that's for, looking to the law office, is that for any noise prohibition? Noise
Yes.
violation would be this $100 a day or $200 for continuous.
Right. The original resolution basically said that noise violations, the first one is 100, anything after that is 200, which is double the violation for the entire, for the sections. The base violation fee for the entire section was $100. We carve out noise and we say any violation, concurrent violations that continue are now $200. When I first wrote the resolution, I attached the fee to the noise section that 028 was amended. Upon further Office of Law consideration of the bill, it was recommended that the placement of the fee increase in the fee schedule be changed to a different section. So the amendment just changes the section that the fee is attached to.
From .20 to .120.
Right. So it's the noise section versus the fines and violations section.
And then further splits it into noise and other
Right.
general.
Because it's no longer attached to the noise ordinance, it has to be clear that the fee increases on noise only.
I'm prepared to make a motion to adopt the Tierney Amendment number 1.
I will second it, but I need discussion. Because I'm looking for where it speaks to the change in location.
So if you look, do you have the amendment up?
I
have it here in hard copy.
Goes from,
okay,
changes, it's 20 in the legislation, but changes it
to 20, okay, I'm good, thank
But
you.
I do have a question for the law office. Trip. I do have a question for the law office, though. So, because in my experience, when So this is getting changed to 120, which is where it says that violations of this chapter can be issued. But because I'm asking because when I was in code enforcement, when you write a violation, you have to cite the section of code when you write it. So traditionally, it's been citing the actual violation. So if it's the chapter for the violation, so if the chapter says no noise above, or no noise above 120 decibels or whatever it is, 60 decibels, you would cite that. Or if it said specifically no leaf blowers, you would cite that section. But this instead cites the section that simply authorizes fines. It doesn't authorize a specific violation. So I guess, is it sufficient because in the citation you would write the actual violation?
Yeah, we typically advise our enforcement officers to cite in the citation the code section which provides for the activity which is prohibited. Does that answer your question? I don't think I would advise they use.
So they wouldn't cite this 120, they would cite the...
They would cite
Actual.
whatever provision says you may not exceed X decibels.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Chair, I'm looking at the box at the top.
Of
So
the
we
amendment?
see 1112.020, we see 1112.210, and down here we see 1112.120. Is that just a transposition in the box at the top, or is there still another fine section, 1112.210?
I think that's a typo.
That is a
There is no
typo.
210.
Thank God.
All right, can we get that corrected for Monday? Although he's probably the only one who would notice that.
Okay,
All right.
so we have a motion.
We have a motion, it's been seconded. Any other
Alderman?
discussion?
I'm sorry, but we were talking about when the Finance Committee made this, and it does appear that we did make this amendment. But was that just a typo? I didn't hear the
Yes.
answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
That'll get corrected. All right, all those in favor of the,
Alderman Satter,
Oh, yes.
I got one small point.
Yeah.
In this amendment, it uses the term fine for repeat. Well, I guess it uses repeat. I didn't see repeat. It says repeat. I saw the word continuous, and I wondered what that actually means.
$100 the first time,
Well,
$200.
I think the
That-
word repeat
that's-
probably takes care of it, but when I
that
see,
wouldn't actually, that's not actually in the, that's just a header in the legislation. It's not the actual code change. The actual code change is only, if you look at the legislation itself, well, even in the legislation, that's not relevant, I don't think, because if you look at the fee schedule in the appendices, that's the ruling header. So under the fine, not fees, sorry. And that header is, that's what that uses, fine for repeat or continuous violation. So that's just already baked into our fine schedule. So I hear you, but that's a bigger question I don't want to take up here.
I neglected to see the term repeat beforehand. I think that takes care of the concern
Yeah.
I originally had.
Yeah, all right. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Move
All right,
that
now
the
we
committee
finally get to
recommend-
move on to,
Move the committee recommend
Oh,
R
'cause that was just amended. Thank you.
5123 with the amendment.
Do you want to?
I'll second it, yeah.
All those in favor,
we had
please say
already
aye.
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 Aye, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, now we're finished with the legislative part. And finally move on to our director, Jakubiak. And welcome. I think this is your first meeting perhaps for us. I'm sure it was riveting for you to sit there and listen to our discussion. So this is for the development update. Thanks for joining us. Are you sure, do you have, let's see, was there a
We don't
spreadsheet
have-
provided or anything? Do you have a spreadsheet or anything that we could look at to follow? Or are you just doing this?
I do not have a
okay.
You're going to
spreadsheet.
mime it?
I can act it out. Chris Jakubiak, for the record, the Planning and Zoning Department. I don't mind at all sitting here. It's actually peaceful, relaxing. It was a needed break for me. This week has been absolutely incredible. So for our entire office, but so it's been nice.
Yeah.
You just hear this 20 decibel mosquito noise coming from
Yeah.
up here.
Thank you, Mr. Ruther.
And I admire some of your jokes, Alderman Arnett. Yeah, very good. So would you, by way of background, there has been a practice of doing a rather complicated spreadsheet, multiple pages front and back. We're in the process of reforming this table and its presentation to the public in favor of having a map in place of the simple table with a graphic. So you scroll over the project, you get all the data. So it's visual and you can see where in the city the project is. So we're in that process of doing that at this moment. And there are projects on this list that should have come off because they're under construction and there are no further approvals necessary. So by leaving them on, it gives the impression that we're still working on them, and we don't want to give that impression. We just want projects that are active, that folks may be involved in tracking and understanding where they are, so they can get the information they need. Once they're constructed, though, they don't need to be on the list. They could be on another list, of course, but not on this principled list.
And let me interrupt for a second, because to give you some introduction and back up a little bit, this is something that was started, I can't remember if we started this or if it was the last term, but in any case, what started it was we wanted to get, we often get questions about projects in our awards and elsewhere in the city. And so from an environmental perspective, we wanted to see where they are with the process, with forest conservation, where are they getting stormwater review, that kind of thing.
Right.
So we know, so we're prepared. So that's kind of
Yeah.
where this came from. So we're just focusing really on the environmental perspective,
Okay.
but some of us may have general questions about project status.
Okay, so I could take you through the open projects and focus on that, not discuss the number of units in any project, but just its status and its status with respect to forest conservation and stormwater management and grading permits.
Yes, let me see does the committee want to go through all the open or just particular ones?
Or you just have questions, maybe.
I mean, how long is the list?
Actually, once we pare it down to just the basic projects, we're looking at, with the addition of City Dock now, about 7 projects.
7?
That's it?
Actually,
Okay.
in reality,
I think we'd like to
Let's
hear them all.
go through them, yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
So there's Parkside Preserve.
Right.
That project has obtained Forest Conservation Act approval. The grading permit has been issued. As you know, parts of the project are under construction, but the single-family element, the townhouse permits have been issued. The single-family element is still under review by our staff, permit review.
And it's still producing silt runoff.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah. I just drove through last month and saw what I thought was milky white stuff heading into Quiet Waters Park. I may have just been after a heavy-duty rain, but
Well, I think Public Works, they investigated, and Ms. Gold may have most latest, but last I heard is they determined that there was clean water leaving the site, but it was picking up some of the fine sediment pollution that had been deposited over the years by previous failures. Is that your understanding, Ms. Gold?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So I think, and this is not planning and zoning's purview, or responsibility, but it just goes to the point we'll need to make sure they really remediate that before we release their bond.
Agreed.
Okay.
Yeah, very good. Parole Place Everyone familiar with that?
Sorry, backing up.
Yeah.
The Parks and Reserve, the other big question for that, just also brief view, is back, the last administration ended up essentially purchasing a chunk of forest in the corner of that project, and I believe it was it's become, at some point, it's going to become a conservation easement and a park.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if that triggers with the completion of the project.
I don't recall exactly. It's approximately
Yeah.
4 acres of property. And I know there were nearby residents interested in cleaning up the area and putting trails in that area.
Yeah.
I am aware of that, but I don't have the details on that project. So is it pending the transfer of property or a conservation separate easement, public access easement?
Not, there's a conservation easement already there on that property.
For forest conservation?
Of course, conservation,
Well,
yeah.
there's supposed to be at some point. I guess that's, if somebody could get clarification from
Yeah.
Public Works, I think they'd be the one perhaps who would have the answer to that.
Okay.
Alderman Arnett?
Well,
So,
may I ask, did the city purchase this piece of land that we're talking
Yes.
about?
Pantalettes did.
Not sure exactly where it is on
Okay.
the property.
Just good to know.
But this is actually, I think, a very good place to start, because it strikes me, our purview is all matters conservation, only part of which relates to planning and zoning. One of the questions I want to ask about the new director of Public Works is, has he adopted the checklist that the previous director from Public Works created, which was really good, including timestamp photographs attached that actually capture this silt runoff, or apparently not necessarily, what I was seeing was not necessarily, although it did look like white stuff going into Quietwater's Park.
Alderman, yeah, that's a good question. Just to let you know, I've extended an invitation to Public Works to come to our next meeting.
Good.
To talk about stormwater.
Good.
So that would be a good time to bring
Yeah,
that up.
because
But I think
it-
the answer is yes.
Yeah,
but-
we need to coordinate across all the departments in a matrix management kind of a setup.
No, thank you for recognizing that, because a lot of what we do is coordinating the reviews of other agencies. And you're acknowledging that actually helps us coordinating with them. A lot of their reviews are often very complex and extend beyond periods where we're finished our reviews. So good stuff. The next project, Parole Place, which, as you know, is a mixed-use project. That is getting close to going to the Planning Commission for a public hearing. And in our office just last week, there was a jurisdictional meeting. All the various reviewers came in to comment on their adequate public facilities evaluations. That's the only thing that's been holding this project up to go to the Planning Commission. So the agencies reported. A number of agencies still have outstanding issues. They're still working through. So as soon as we get those in, we're going to schedule a meeting. But we're taking a much more active stance. We're insisting that agencies, our internal agencies, planning, zoning, deliver the comments. A traffic study was required. Because of the delays, it expired. A new traffic study that had to be done. SHA has a different set of engineers reviewing traffic studies, so there's new comments. So the applicant has to address new comments. But we're trying to facilitate this. It's a project that has broad support in the community, and it has an approved forest conservation delineation, and forest conservation plan is under review, except that it's ready to go. It's just contingent on these Planning Commission approvals. So that's teed up and ready to go as soon as the APFO issues are resolved.
And which project is it? You said ACE?
Parole Place.
Oh, okay.
Parole
Parole
Place.
place. Okay. Thank you.
And
APF,
Question.
the current APF rules or the draft new ones?
The current.
Good, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes.
well, hopefully the new ones if we amend it, will be better than the current.
Yes,
But
better than they are now, that's.
But what was my question on this one? You said it's mixed. It contains some mixed use.
Yes.
So, and this is something just FYI for the committee, I guess, not necessarily environmental. Although, but in any case, is I do want to update the APF, the Adequate Public Facilities, amend the introduced legislation, because the introduced legislation I don't think does enough. It doesn't really do anything to promote pedestrian cycling infrastructure, and I'm not a planner, so if you could provide clarity, but instinctually it seems to me that mixed use would function better when you create the infrastructure for pedestrians, right?
Yes, yes.
To support it, because it seems like having a mixed use along next to a highway is not going to work.
Well, but you're putting your finger on an issue of real importance. Eric Lashinsky and I had a meeting with Victoria Buckland yesterday on the new standards. And when we got to the traffic issues in the revised draft, I commented that the APF doesn't really address the vision of the town planning that calls for more walkable communities. As long as we're requiring developers to pass a test that's geared to making roadways bigger, wider, more efficient, turning radiuses wider to address APFO, we're never going to get a walkable community.
Right.
You're constantly building the capacity, the infrastructure to make it adequate while minimizing the ability to cross the street.
Right.
So that needs a lot of thinking, and we actually encouraged Vicky to, in turn, encourage you to give us time to prepare a response to this question, because it's so foundational. As you may know, the APF standards generally, nationally, and here in Maryland too, really coincided with a backlash against development generally. And it's often been a tool to prevent development that otherwise would be very sound and supportable. So when it comes to traffic, the implications of following blindly an APFO standard are really adverse to the new comprehensive plan, adverse to the old comprehensive plan that talks about more walkability, bicycle, and the like. So it's not to minimize the effect that development has on traffic, but it needs to be more balanced.
Yeah, and I think it's also personally, and I think for all of us, I think the APF in place, we don't see that as a way to stop or slow down development. It's a matter of how do we get them to contribute towards better infrastructure, right?
Exactly.
Because it can't always be the taxpayer. And so the traffic is a part of it, and I hope, I will send this to you right now, but I have a long list of amendments. I can't recall if they've been finalized or not to the legislation that's been introduced. And it adds in, I think I forgot to address the traffic, but I put in a whole section dealing with mobility.
It's because traffic was taken out.
I know. Mobility as far as making like I forget what I called it, but like a sustainable, equitable mobility lens as far as ensuring that there is adequate pedestrian infrastructure and there is adequate cycling. Because as a comparison, the county likes to blast us, but they put in all this high density development in Parole, and they couldn't even. And they're not putting, in some cases they're expanding, it looks like the sidewalk, but there's no broader look at how do we have connectivity as far as cycling, transit. It's just all focused on automobile.
Yep.
And it'd be nice if we could expand. So in any case, I guess my point is I'll send that to you, but it's substantive enough. I'm hoping to get these amendments to the Planning Commission, so it may be worth tying into your staff review of the amendments, proposed amendments.
Okay.
But thank you. But yeah, so anyway, it's good to hear we're putting in some mixed use, though.
90 residences over retail units and 68 townhouses. I can't recall how many square feet of retail use is there, but it's not minor. It's a real project. It's a substantial project.
And to your point on the standards, that's also something I'm working on introducing. It's like I forget, I wish Cynthia was still here, but I think they call it like a safe community or safe streets legislation. They've done it elsewhere where they combine a bunch of initiatives. For example, no turn on reds or elevated continuous crosswalks to make it safe for pedestrians, or things like allowing bicyclists to yield on stop signs. But one of the things in there is updating the standards because, I think one of the points you may have been getting at is our road standards don't really allow for good integration with some of our pedestrian and mixed-use plans, right? I think that's what you're kind of getting at.
Yeah, well, yeah, and in the practical way it's just a simple turning radius, or if an APF drives the need for a separate turning lane for traffic signalization, then you've increased the walking distance at least 12 feet, more like 14 feet, which makes it longer to cross an intersection, makes it practically impossible for a disabled person. So there's all kinds of implications to widening certain infrastructure.
Yeah. Okay, I see your point. Okay, thank you.
Chinquapin at Lincoln Drive. This is just a small residential or apartment building. It's there's no forest conservation or environmental aspects to this really. It's just a redevelopment of existing urban use in a very urban area.
And what's it becoming?
An apartment building. Retail on the bottom with apartments above, 8 apartments.
On Chinquapin?
Yeah. And that's a project that's tied up in APF because the complexities of it have challenged the police department to find that it's adequate. And it's further been challenged to figure out how to develop a mitigation plan. So it's delayed that project, which is otherwise supportable and been approved.
But you have to think that's the number one. The complaints we receive all have to deal with infrastructure impacts, right? People they complain about public safety, they complain about traffic impacts. So there's got to be a way to get that mitigated.
The lofts at Eastport Landing. I wish Tripp were still here. The latest on that, well, that's been in appeals for quite some time. The latest, the judge at the circuit court gave a bench opinion essentially saying that Tom Smith, who was an acting director, did not err in finding that an appeal was not timely filed. So the person who's been appealing this case filed for an appeal, but it was beyond the limits. So his appeal was essentially denied because it was not filed in a timely way. And the judge
Which one
found
was that?
The Eastport Shopping Center.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Eastport Shopping Center, sorry.
Okay.
So that's still, though, that is still in the legal wrangling, and I would defer to the law office for any real expertise in that area. But we're still waiting for that issue to work out and for the appeals to resolve themselves.
So how long will that, I mean, I thought once the appeal was done and there's no other appeal in the works, shouldn't they be moving forward with their?
Yeah, there was an appeal of that decision, the subsequent decision, and then place it back in front of the Board of Appeals.
Yeah.
So that's why I refer you to Tripp, who can advise.
Okay.
And I can ask him after this meeting, and we can get a written response to you, if you like.
Okay, well, it'd be nice to get that off the dime.
Willows at Forest Drive. Mr. Chairman, you might be familiar with this one because it's not far from you. And this is a mixed plan development, 58 affordable housing units using it's a bona fide affordable housing project at 1701 Forest Drive. That is ready to go from our standpoint. We've approved everything, all the permits, it's all teed up and ready to go, except that the applicant has to obtain a right-of-way plat, a final approval of a right-of-way plat from Anne Arundel County, and has to obtain a kind of the county's signature on the final plat because it encompasses some land in the county. So once the county resolves those matters, We are going to sign the grading permit because it's all ready to go and issue the building permits. And that project is likely to see construction in the near term.
And which one was it? I'm sorry.
Willows.
Willows.
The
Oh, the
Willows at
Willows, that's
Forest
what I thought
Drive.
you were, yeah.
Yeah.
But I remember there was some urgency about getting stuff approved by last December, or they wouldn't get their money. Are they getting their money?
They're still working with us, and that issue has not been presented to me as a matter. In fact, we're very much in coordination with them.
They were getting tax credits,
Yeah.
and that was the timeline that they were on.
We don't want to see.
I know, and I think they made it. But I have a question in that they still don't have access. So what is the plan? Is it in our CIP to build the road that's behind the property so they do have access?
I believe that project is tied to the adjoining proposed development. Would that be Providence?
Providence Point?
Villages at Providence Point, which is on the hook to complete that project. I don't think that's part and parcel of this particular approval. But I know that they've been discussed interchangeably because obviously they're planned to be interconnected, but I think the villages at Providence Point is on the hook to complete that project.
Would we give them all of the approvals without that access?
I think we would. I think it's not necessary for them in order to develop the project.
Even though they can't get to it?
No, they can get to it from Forest Drive.
But we weren't granted permission, were we, to get the right in, right out from Forest Drive?
It's been approved. They have full access. They have the ability to access the property from Forest Drive.
Okay, I thought that was denied, but my mistake then.
Rocky Gorge?
No, the Willows.
I didn't know that was an issue.
Yeah, at that light there. And there's supposed to be a road parallel to Forest Drive that's behind that property. And Skipper Lane is what it will be, yeah. And the American Legion, to give them full access to the property. But there's so many pieces to that still.
It's very complicated. The American Legion would be dedicating some right-of-way to make the project work.
And I think we purchased a sliver that was on the Newtown Drive side between the American Legion and the street, I think. That was what I heard last, that we had gotten that land so that the road could continue through
Okay.
and eventually connect.
I think you've challenged my recollection of this particular project. There's details, but I can get them
Yeah.
to you if you'd like.
So they aren't on the line for that road. It's Village of Providence Point.
That's my understanding. Yeah.
Because we already have Skipper Lane comes through your ward, right? Back behind the CVS, right?
Right.
And then
They're
dead ends
supposed-
there, right?
Right.
And that's where the Willows is going, or?
And that's where it's supposed to connect across.
Yeah.
And I understood that we were picking up the portion of the road behind the Willows,
Yeah.
and then it was connecting to Providence Point. So, and I've never been clear, and I've not seen a CIP that speaks to that.
Okay.
So,
So that would have to go through Newtown?
Newtown Drive, cross Newtown Drive.
Okay.
Where are
I
you
guess-
looking? There's no houses. Do you see where the Willows? See,
Willows would go right here,
Yeah.
I think, right?
Uh-huh. And where's Skipper?
Skipper's right. Where's Skipper's is up here, I see. Okay.
Yeah, and see,
So we
that's
go
supposed to
right
go
through there.
straight across and then connect to Providence Point.
Okay.
Is this all part of the Forest Drive back pass?
Yeah, right. Well, yeah.
It's a challenging one, I understand, so.
I guess if you get, but you said that they're not, you're sure that's on Village of Providence Point to put in that segment?
Well, now that you've all expressed doubts about this, I'm not sure. But I will be sure, and I'll get a report back to you,
Okay,
memo
thank
or
you.
something. I just remember that maybe it's one section of it versus the entire section, but it's complicated. Now, before I throw more dust on this one, I'll stop and bring you some time devoted to it and a little memo to you.
Sounds good.
I understand, and, we've been trying to clarify this for some time, so it's not that you just don't know about it because, you're relatively new. There's been questions about who's paying for that portion of the road from day one, and we've not gotten a clear answer.
So it'll come up in this budget.
So,
2 more to go.
Thank you.
Well, the Villages of Providence Point. That is forest conservation determination is approved. The judge made a determination in this case that the Planning Commission did not err in its determination about forest conservation. The department is in fact tasked with assessing proposed disturbances to contiguous forests and priority forests. And if the environmental standing committee would like a report on this, I can talk with Tripp and we can prepare a report that really breaks out the legal aspects of this, because it all relates to the Forest Conservation Act and how the staff administered that act. The positive thing is that the city was found to have operated correctly and not to have erred.
the most recent appeal was denied just last week, I believe.
It was about, but maybe 2 weeks ago. It was, Tripp briefed me on February 1st, and I think it was the day after, so it was the 31st of January, I believe, that was heard.
That's Laura Townsend and Forrest Mays.
City Dock. Okay, we can skip that. That was approved by the Planning Commission at its meeting just last week. However, they still have to formulate their official decision and publish their decision. But that project was approved. And incidentally, that includes a $1.8 million contribution to the city's fee in lieu program.
How much?
$1.8 million.
Fee in lieu for forest conservation, for afforestation?
For critical area mitigation.
Critical area mitigation?
Yeah, so it will enable funding for canopy, tree planting, mitigation of stormwater management issues, retrofit of stormwater systems, and similar projects, all within the critical area, which, as you know, makes up a major part of Annapolis. I will say that the Critical Area Commission and our staff have coordinated on this, and they've offered some ideas. We actually see that there might be a possibility to leverage some of that money to obtain additional funding and create a sustainable funding source for canopy and tree planting within the critical area for many years to come with this. So we're not seeing it as, we're not doing the math and saying, well, how many trees does that mean that we can plant today? But it may actually create the resources available for something really dynamic and environmentally friendly. So that is a condition of the approval of the Planning Commission, that they comply with the critical area fee in lieu. And that is a part of the overall budget for the City Dock project now.
That's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who increased those fees? I mean, it's my initial reaction was, well, it's weird that the city is paying itself, but I can see what you're saying. It's going towards a good program. We need more. I mean, we just had a meeting last night with a group called Save Our Trees, and we had a presentation a couple months back from our forest group and with Brian and Eric about the comp plan goals, and when I calculated, I think you and Ross back, 10, whatever years ago, more than that, 15, passed a tree canopy goal by 2036. And when you calculate it out, we're way behind and we need to plant like 1,300, about 1,400 trees a year.
Yeah.
1,400 trees a year, and we don't have a funding stream to do it.
Right.
This sounds like it'd actually be a good portion of that. But we need to take a closer look at that fund. Because it's different than the watershed restoration fund. But, yeah.
There are parameters on its use. It's, the city has a memorandum of understanding with the Maryland Critical Area Commission. It stipulates what type of projects are eligible, and there's some reporting requirements, because this is all driven by state law. But the funding would be available for canopy coverage, tree planting, and greening within the critical area. You could quite conceivably think of some of the things you might have seen on your trip to Europe and think that would be a useful approach within the critical area. And provided the funding's available, there's opportunities, and the critical area staff is quite excited about this possibility, but also quite diligent in applying state law with respect. They want to make sure that this money is not dispersed into the general fund. It has to go into the fee and lieu program that the city maintains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. I think, well, so Ms. God well, actually, I guess he works for you now, Mr. Kubrak, director.
Brian.
But Brian should know about that.
He does. He
good.
very much knows about it. Yep.
Good.
He's been tasked with the responsibility of assembling a program around this. You know, how we take this abstract idea and actually make it come to life.
Well, so that's going to be a discussion. I haven't briefed the committee yet on this, but we have the budget coming up. It's going to come to us in April. April. And then what I'd like to do next month, we're going to be having a discussion about our stormwater fund, the watershed restoration fund. I'm thinking, I wonder, maybe we could loop into that. Well, so for the meeting after that, I'd like to kind of have a conversation about what we may want to get included in the budget or propose as a committee. Part of that's going to be the tree program, and which again is it doesn't have enough funding if we're serious about this goal. But maybe we could have a conversation, update on that fund at that time, the critical area fund.
I'll just say, without getting into those discussions too far, each department was asked to prepare a draft budget and by December 31st, and our draft budget included a sizable increase to the overall tree program. And our current recommendation is that it be set at $212,000, which is well above the current level, which is, I think, 151 or something like that. So, but there's a limit to what we can actually do. You know, there has to be capacity and programs to plant trees. And Brian would advise me of this. We'd welcome more resources, but there's a limit to what our department can do and manage, and the programs and the citizen efforts. So we see this critical area program as a real great shot in the arm.
Yeah.
But of course, that's limited to the critical area.
Right. That's the other part of it is, and we've chatted, I think, and I think I've been pretty open with this. One of the things I want to try to do is utilize our watershed restoration fund to help pay for the area outside the critical area.
Yeah.
To actually be because that would be a recurring dedicated fund for our forestry program. And frankly, as Brian, I think, has made clear over the years, we need more than just one person working on this if we're serious about it. And that would give us a dedicated fund. But that's why it ties in with our conversation next month about, do we even have money in that fund? And do we need to increase those fees and whatnot?
Right.
But anyway, that's where it's all, to give you the big picture.
But on this, it's not just planting the trees. We also have to maintain the trees. And
Yeah, thank you.
I've wondered what is the relationship with parks and planning in terms of tree maintenance. I think they do maintain trees on city property, But, there may be an opportunity to coalesce some forces here and think about it in the budget. But we do, after we plan them, we've got to keep them alive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. There's the Rocky Gorge or Athens project. It's referred to.
They're all in my ward. Anything that,
Okay.
yes.
Well, the Athens project, there was quite the push to get it across the finish line through Christmas, I'd say, or leading up through the holidays. So the staff has completed this project. We're able to release the building permits to actually start the construction on the rest of it. But the builder has not paid the fees, the building fees, building permit fees. And so we're holding the permits until the fees are paid, which is the normal course of business.
How much money is that?
I don't know the number with me. I don't have it. But we understand and that, and I don't have the details on this, that the project or some aspect of the project is involved in a suit that doesn't involve the city between private parties. That may be the reason why a request hasn't made to receive the permits, but they're there at the Planning and Zoning Office and everything's completed. So that's the status. It's a project that's in a holding pattern now through no fault of the city. We're just waiting to release the permits.
This project has been moving forward without the city. From a meeting that I had early on, within a month of the property being purchased, they had a beautiful website indicating they were selling the units.
Yeah.
And the least expensive unit, I had to assume, were the MPDU units. But there had never been a discussion with Ms. Wellman as to how to price those units out. So they were kind of taken off without the city.
Right.
I think that has, I don't want to say it's stopped, but we've had to stay on it constantly. So that's,
The MPDU agreement has been structured and signed and executed. The forest conservation is all wrapped up. Everything's done on this project beautifully.
Okay.
The only thing is that the applicant has not obtained the permits. It hasn't paid the fee, and we haven't released the permits. The applicant knows that the fees are there waiting. They know they owe us money, and that's where things stand.
So is there a timeline where,
I was just discussing that with internally in the staff, and we weren't able to find at the time the person that could answer that question. That at what point does a building permit do we retract it? Usually there's a timeline that starts upon issuance, but since we haven't issued the permits, we're in this. But there is an obligation on part of the applicant to pay for work done on behalf of this. So we have to think about that internally, how we recoup those costs. But we're not rushing right now because it's relatively soon. It's been, I guess, 45 days now, roughly, that we've been in this situation.
seems a lot longer.
Oh, yeah, for the entire project, yes.
Yeah, and the residents are starting, not just starting, they have been asking questions and wondering what the heck is going on. They're, living next to a big muddy pit.
Right.
And so, let's hope that he resolves his legal issue and gets back on it. Does Tripp want to,
There was,
I'm sorry,
wanted
Mr.
to
Fulton.
defer to you in describing the legal aspects of Providence Point. And the Lofts of Eastport too, yes.
Hey folks, Tripp Fulton from the Office of Law.
I'm sorry?
Tripp Fulton from the Office of Law.
Yes.
I'm going to make a few corrections about the Lofts at Eastport Landing. So Originally, there was an APF mitigation plan, which was reached between the city and the developer, as I understand it. There was an attempt to appeal that determination by the department. That appeal was determined to be untimely. The decision as to whether or not this citizen's appeal was timely or not was an inquiry that went before the Board of Appeals. The Board of Appeals determined that the department did not err in finding that this particular appeal of the mitigation plan was not filed timely, therefore it did not go forward. That decision of the Board of Appeals as to which upheld the department's determination that this appeal is not timely has since been appealed to the circuit court for a judge to look at. That's the extent of that project at the moment.
Okay,
It's a little confusing. If you have questions, I would understand.
I understand. Unfortunately, I do.
I'm going to go back to Rocky Gorge for a sec. Because looking at the building permit code, chapter 1705, and believe me, I have no sympathy at all for this developer, or frankly the project. I was never a big fan, so because it's just been so long, the code it's following is now probably over 15 years old.
2006.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay, so well over, gosh. So that's what's frustrating is we've updated our laws and they don't have to comply with them at all because of the tolling and all that nonsense that went on. Don't want to revisit that, but point out 1705-110 is also for Mr. Fulton so under B, issuance, the director of planning and zoning or the director's designee may declare a building permit to be void unless issued within 30 days from the date of notice to the applicant pursuant to subsection A. To me, that reads that once it's approved, if it's not picked up within 30 days, you may very well just go ahead and void the entire building permit. You know, law office need to clarify, but that seems to give you an option because, again, I have no sympathy if they have to start over, I don't know, at least to a certain degree.
But I heard Mr. Jakubiec say it was about him paying the fees. Did I misunderstand that? It's not about picking up the permit so much as he hasn't paid the appropriate fees.
And in order to pick up the fees or pick up the permits, he has to pay the fees.
Right.
But the same thing, I think it's part and parcel of the same
Okay,
thing.
I
It's
see.
just-
Okay.
That may be the reason why they haven't come to pick up the fees, but there might be other reasons too.
Well, it's also their permits become void if they can't start work within 40 days. So if he doesn't have enough money to pay for the permit fees, is he going to even have enough money to start construction? It's just, all of this is just, it spins out of control and who's going to be left holding the bag? Meanwhile, we've got this site with all the trees are moved, dirt just sitting there. You know, I've been tempted to go down there and walk around to see what's happening, but
You can see it from Harris Island Boulevard. You don't need to go in there and walk around. You can-
I actually have pulled off to look through the fence, but
What you see is what you get.
anyway,
To stabilize that with Saltair or whatever you call it.
yeah, I suppose they have, I think, and I haven't gotten complaints, but anyway, just to let you know.
It's been very helpful and enlightening to go through these projects for all of us. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you for taking the time. Anything else?
Yeah.
For the director? Yeah,
No,
right?
thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the report. I still have a preference for a hard copy.
Yes.
So however we do it, but I wanted to take the time, since you're here, to thank the efforts that John Manessa on your staff has gone through before the Rules Committee and on the short-term rental legislation. I was quite impressed about his diligence and his grasp of all the issues. So we like to thank people when they do a good job for us.
That's
His fortitude.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
He
How many
is,
years has it been?
he is the rock in planning and zoning, and not suggesting I'm anybody but myself. But let's, I'll make sure I pass that on to him. Thank you.
Yeah.
He has more work to do, by the way, but
Yes, he did.
And to thank you to Mr. Adams, who attended a community meeting after hours yesterday.
Yeah.
That's good. So, all right. Thank you. I think we've concluded your section. Ms. Scott, did you have any update? I know you were just here last week, I think, right? Or week before?
We were together at the special meeting 2 weeks ago. I received some more information to update the resilience and sustainability highlights project list for February. I just got some this morning and I added a few other updates. So I'll just distribute to this real quickly so you have what it is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You asked specifically about Hawkins Cove last time we were together, and Hawkins Cove, they did finish their 30% design. They picked one of the 3 alternative living shoreline designs. They're all very similar. It was just a matter of what side would the kayak launch go on, how far the pier would stick out, if there would be more rock or less rock involved in the design. So they were going with a less rock type of design, a more natural feature, because there's not a lot of wave action in the cove. You don't really need that. More of a koi log buffer between the plants and to absorb some of the wave action there. We talked a bit last week about where the kayak launch would be, and it may be that it makes more sense to put it out at the end of the dock, and whether the dock will go out further to reach deeper water or whether dredging will take care of that. But it may make more sense to have a pier launch rather than a launch on shore, and therefore you don't have to do as much dredging to get to the launch area for the kayak wreck. So they are at about the 30% design. They've done all the site survey, the soil surveys, the topographical surveys, and importantly, the property surveys. It was unclear as to who owns what where, so we can determine where we can actually do the work. There is interest on HACA's part and the city's part in acquiring some of the property from HACA for the trails and to make it city property, and HACA doesn't use it. They don't have a lot of interest in owning the wooded section on the hill. So
Purchasing?
I don't know exactly what they're thinking about doing there, but that was discussed at the last meeting.
We could get easements too.
Yeah, to just get an easement to use it. So the next step is for public meetings. That's baked into the grant money for the grants that are both the NIFWIF and the Chesapeake Bay Trust grant for the project. And so those will be scheduled. There will be stakeholder grants with HACA, with the Eastport Civic Association, with the Spa Creek Conservancy, and some other nonprofits that are involved in the project, individual meetings, and then also a public meeting at Pip Moyer. And those meetings will be scheduled late February, early March they'll present the concept design and get more feedback. And there's a lot of interest in the public so far. It's mostly about improving trails, trail safety, getting rid of the muddy trails, getting rid of icy trails, having better access as far as having them graded where they're steep, and connectivity to Truxton Park, and then having some benches and picnic tables for passive enjoyment. And then, of course, the improvements to the pier and the kayak launch. So after that, we will go forward with the rest of the design and into the construction phase. Because of funding, we're waiting on some funding from FEMA, which may not come until 2025. We may have to start using some of the NIFWIF money we have in hand, the National Wildlife Fish money, to actually do construction. We're hoping to use all of that for design. We might have to dip into some of it for construction in order to keep this project moving. We will also look back to DNR for some additional money. We have $75,000 from the state for dredging. That may not be sufficient for all of the dredging we need to do there, so we'll reach back out to DNR for some additional dredging. money, but we're just talking about dredging the channel. So we need to get a better estimate from Bayland, our contractor, on how much it actually will cost to do the dredging as well as handle the dredge spoils. And we would prefer, and we think that we can use most of the dredge spoils as part of the project, right there as part of the soils you need to build up the living shoreline.
I thought we were going to use it to build up Eastport.
To build a Eastport, there you go.
Or City Dock.
May I ask, how much funding did we get from NIFWIF?
So $500,000 from NIFWIF. We have $135,000 from the Chesapeake Bay Trust. Half of that is from the Denker Family Foundation funneled through the trust. And then Patrick Denker was on a phone call we had last week. He wanted an update on where we are with the project, and he said that a number of his neighbors, he lives on Spot Creek, are interested in raising additional funds for dredging, and if there was some sort of match that could be made from another source, perhaps the Resilience Authority could come up with a match through some other grant funding. So we'll look into that to try to build some more in our dredging fund, so we can do a bit more with that. So we're looking at more design and permitting this year as we go through the public engagement process, the refining of the design, and then you won't see construction most likely until 2025 on that project. Hoping for a ribbon cutting by the end of 2025.
And so are they going to be removing the old pier and pilings before dredging?
No, it looks like the pilings are in good shape. It's just the portion of that pier became a little damaged. May not even have to remove all of the pier. And the current design, you could leave that just L-shaped pier, but there's also an alternative design that takes that pier out much further.
Can I throw out, it might be a random idea, but, I wonder if the University of Maryland or somebody would be interested in doing I'd be interested, just the scientist part of me, to see, do a core sample of the sediment there, just to kind of see how much is accumulated from over the years, what the source is, where the original bottom is, because it looks like it's filled up incredibly over the past
It
60
has.
years. I'm just curious.
It has, because we have photos where we had sailboats on those pilings.
Really?
That are sunk there. Yeah, there are photos with sailboats on those
Now
pilings.
there's probably like
Yeah,
6-8 feet of
yeah.
sediment and
This much water.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Anyway,
lot of
all right.
sediment.
All right, 5
So-
minutes.
There's that, and let me see where else you especially asked me for updates. Moving along with our pollinator habitat at the solar park, we've done some research, talked to different companies. We're not going to have to do an RFP, so this is going to move a little faster. We just need to get 3 bids to do the initial design and scoping of the work. So what we'll do is we'll get what the product will be from the contractor at this point will be design, what kind of seed we're going to use, and what areas we can design for the entire park, with inside and outside of the fence, what that would cost to actually implement and what it would cost to maintain it. Then, based on the budget that we have for this year, we can start to implement the project. Now, we had a meeting with Novus Renewables, the operator of the solar park, and learned that they have in place a contract for mowing for the remainder of this year through 2024. So we may be forced to look outside the fence first and then look inside the fence in 2025 because of their mowing schedule. But if you look in the capital improvement project, there's money allocated in 2025 and 2026 for this project, more money than there is this year. And we can look at different approaches, such as overseeding and light tilling and burn off, and whether or not we would do a combination of both or one or the other, because we're going to be limited, depending on what we get back from this contract, we're going to find out how much we can actually do. And that will determine where and what we do.
Yeah, I guess it's a viable option. Just essentially dethatch it and overseed it with.
We'll just see what we come back with from whoever we pick to do this work, and what recommendations they make based on the money we have for this fiscal year.
Okay.
Because I have to allocate that money.
Yeah. Okay.
The ferry project is moving along. We had the RFP ready to go, but we did learn that from a conversation I had this week with the Maryland Transit Administration. I was trying to make sure everything keeps clicking along with that project. They have started the environmental assessment piece of it, the NEPA process for our landing sites, working with DNR. However, there is a NEPA process associated with the actual ferry itself, and we are not permitted to advertise our RFP, which we get ready to go, until the Department of Transportation puts together a particular package with particular things in it to MTA, which has to review it, and they have to provide the city with a letter of concurrence before we can advertise our RFP. So Department of Transportation knows what those things are that they have to do and to provide them as soon as possible, because there's a period of back and forth between MTA and the city before that letter of concurrence comes out. Then we will advertise our RFP for the design and construction of the ferry. Meanwhile, we're working on the landing sites design. As soon as they get to 10 to 15%, we can submit those designs to MTA to complete their NEPA review.
Okay.
And as you know, that can take, some period of time to do, so we want to keep it rolling along.
Yeah. All right. I'd like to try to end it.
Yep.
Anything else?
No, and there's
saw-
updates in
I
here. There's
think-
not a whole lot of difference because it's only been 2 weeks since we spoke. I've had a number of meetings, and where I just updated this.
Well, I know we will have, at least, I think some of us will have stormwater questions on Green Vest,
Betsy.
but we'll save that for next time.
Okay.
Because other staff will be here. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move that we adjourn.
Second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right. Thank you.